That's the beauty of role playing. You can take 3 or 4 strangers who had, prior to that moment of sitting at the table, never met each other. The only thing they have in common is that they either have done it or have heard about it. And an hour later, you're all best buds, looking out for each other's back, you know, functioning as a team. Where an hour ago you didn't know each other from Adam. We were all oddballs. No,
That's a good
I'm dead
start.
serious. I'm dead serious. If you stop and look at it, Dave Arneson was an oddball. The only kind of job he could hold down was something like his last job, a night watchman,
Oh,
where he
wow.
was by himself, going around every so often, putting the coded key into his clock to show that he was there. And that gave him time to sit in the office in between and think. Gary was flitting from insurance adjuster to actuary to cobbler, and whatever, because he was somewhere in the clouds with all the rest of us. We just hadn't found each other yet. Um, I was a um, long-haired. My last year in the Navy, I was married, and I was very reluctantly in the Navy because my whole outlook had changed when I went to Vietnam.
Okay.
I was on a carrier and I worked on the flight deck. And when I came back, I jumped out of airplanes and I raced motorcycles and got involved in stock car racing on dirt tracks, looking for that adrenaline feed, but it wasn't there. And then I had a child and I settled down. One day we were playing a chainmail game, and I had a question. And this would have been early 74, I think. And I have a rules question. So I went to the back of the book, and there was, it's a called director assistance, sure enough. And hi, you don't know me, but I got a rules question. Fine, let me get comfortable. And that call lasted an hour and a half. And we discovered, we were like brothers from different mothers.
But one of the things that really surprises me is you are employee number one in
Yes,
TSR.
I was.
Um, and in Wisconsin, there were loads of people. There was a large cohort around Gary Gygax who knew about his games, who he played with, and
Hmm.
yet employee number one didn't even come from that group. Employee number one came from outside.
A
Why?
good deal, a good number of his group there were youngsters.
Okay,
Okay. I got there in 75. I was 26.
okay.
That was a big gap there. Okay. And plus I was a veteran. Plus he thought I was a little more worldly and I had a wife and a child, therefore more likely a little more stable in that regard. Now we were all a little mentally unstable or we wouldn't have been doing what we were doing. but in the other regards, I think that was the big thing. Um, Rob and Terry were kids. Um, Len Lakofka lived in Chicago and was not Arnis. It was a thing of, hey, come to our convention in 74. Okay. And I went and I entered a bunch of miniatures events and I won them all. So I'm walking around with a little cardboard box full of trophies. And that's when, hi, how are you? Yeah, good to meet you in face. And so we sat down and we talked, and he talked about how he was planning on expanding the company and that he would take the strategic review. And, I'm a journalism student. Wouldn't I be interested in spinning it into some magazines? And yeah, yeah. And the the commitment was to the idea that we could make this happen. It was certainly wasn't the money. For more than a year, my weekly paycheck was $100. All right. I had a wife that was supporting us the rest of the way. So I was fortunate in that regard. I could live on $100 a week. So, there were a lot of things that made me an ideal candidate. Plus, I came up, I played a couple of games, I bought it, I took it back. We continued before he came up, he urged me in several phone calls to come to the convention, come to the convention. Well, I did, and I didn't have a room, and so it was, a long drive up, play till midnight, and a long drive home. But I bought the game. I bought the brown box set, and the rest just is history, as the cliche goes.
I noticed was issue 3, you mentioned vociferous complaints about fiction. In the sense that there was too much fiction, but you stuck with it and you gave your reasons why.
Yes. And
Um,
you know what? Later on, when after I left and they started dropping it, they received more vociferous complaints because they had more subscribers about dropping the fiction,
Hmm,
So
hmm,
go figure.
hmm.
I stuck with it because um there's I don't want to sound Gary and I were not trying we did not exude hubris, but we realized that many people that we wanted to appeal to did not have the background, the absorbed background of all the fantasy that we had had. All right. And therefore, steal good ideas from something you read. We were encouraging would-be creators, would-be DMs to not only read these books, but hey, if there's an idea you like, use it, modify it, make it your own. And um, in that regard, I was publishing fiction to get people thinking down different tracks. And it was a treat for me to republish a Fritz Leiber story. It was a treat for me to republish an El Sprague de Camp that hadn't seen the light in 30 years. It was a treat for me to meet Gar Fox and publish his stuff, Neil of the Faro Travels. So screw the vociferous readers. I'm going to publish this stuff because I dig doing it. I've told the story before. I was handed a half a peck peach basket, and it was full of notes and pieces of paper and scraps of paper. And I was handed, says, "Here, earn your money. This is Blackmore."
Can I ask you actually you said this before that and I wrote this down. You received a basket of notes, and I wondered if basket was a metaphor. Clearly it's not. It was an actual
No,
basket.
no, it was actually, come on, we're working in Gary's basement. We have one file cabinet. So yes, it was a peach basket. Peach baskets are about this peach basket is about that tall,
Hmm.
about that big around, and it was crammed full of notes in different handwritings on different pieces of paper.
So you had to condense as well as
I had to translate. Then I had to sort. And then I said, okay. And so I sort of followed Greyhawk's format to make Blackmore. And then as soon as it came out, Arneson immediately told everybody that that wasn't his. I had made some abomination of his project.
What were the biggest challenges for you leading up to Dragon number 1? Do you remember?
Putting together 3 knockout issues.
You did them at the same time.
I had 3 piles on, literally, I had 3 piles on my desk. Ready? Little work. Work meant it was a good idea, but ooh, it is either going back or I was going to work on it. And I wanted enough stuff because I was also doing Little Wars on the odd months. So I wanted 2 issues of Little Wars and 2 more issues of Dragon to be pretty much piled up, ready to go to the printer to be typeset. Um, I couldn't put everything great in the first one because the second one is going to be no matter how well I balance them, the second one's always going to be a little letdown for people that are going to expect something even better. No, it's just as good. I hope, I think. That was the hardest thing. Um, I had a policy stamp that was made this fit a postcard. And okay, we're going to use your stuff, etc. Send it back, and let them know that we're going to use their stuff. Or, no, I'm sorry. And if they didn't send something to return it in, I just said, well, sorry, it doesn't fit our needs. You try to let them down easy. Because I got 14-year-old kids sending me stuff. They got great ideas, but you can
Yeah.
tell it's from a 14-year-old kid because he can't draw and he can't complete a paragraph. But it's good ideas. So you don't want to crush their little souls. So I tried to be nice in that regard. When I found somebody that, especially an artist, that because I was getting huge amounts of unsolicited material at the beginning, and we used to call it over the transom, referring to the transom part of the old office windows. That's when stuff got shoved over the transom at night. You came in. Okay. So I had a huge backlog of art. A lot of times that's not what it was drawn for, but it fits the milieu or the genre or whatever. Because did not want to print a typical fanzine that was bars and bars and bars of copy.
Yeah.
I wanted to break it up with art, appropriate art. I wanted header art. I wanted, interior art. Again, trying to inspire imaginations that maybe haven't had the inspiration that I have. Gary never, ever came in and said, publish this. Sometimes when he came in and flopped something on my desk, it was worth it. Sometimes I was a little vague, and I'd tell him that. Yeah, I don't know, Gary. Yeah, that's kind of weak. Yeah, I know what you mean, and so I stall him off. He wasn't demanding, far from it. The farther went down the road we went, the less he did that. But he did give me some great articles. The one that ruined Monopoly, the one that ruined Rail Baron, because he mathematically figured out everything. He ruined Monopoly. And it was a good analytical article he did on Rail Baron. He never said don't. He never said publish this. We shared the idea that we've been talking about since the 75 Gen Con was that a bigger pie it means everybody gets to eat more. I got out of the industry for 20 years and just kind of got on with my life. And when I came back and found out the near reverence that people held, it gobsmacked me. It just I was completely what? Um,
And
because I came back at the Gen Con auction one year, 2006,
right.
and Menser went on and on and on and on, introducing me. He did this, he did that without ever saying my name. So finally, it's like, Frank, let me, and 700, 800 people stood up and gave me a standing ovation
Wow.
because I wasn't dead yet. And I walked out and I said to Frank away from the mic, why? Because I hadn't died yet? What? And I had no idea. And I had no idea what a profound effect Dragon Magazine had on people, even the ones that started reading it long after I left.
Even though you were interested in raising the tide for all boats, was there any sense of because you guys were all war gamers initially, and I know you said you consider yourself a war gamer above an
Yeah,
RPG.
I was a board gamer, then I was a miniatures player, then I became a role player.
So was there any kind of wistfulness back then as to, well, we're being so heavily associated with this one game, which isn't actually a war game anymore anyway.
No,
And we would have liked the war games to do really well. And we want to be a wargaming company rather than this RPG thing that we've
no,
accidentally invented.
no, no. Prior to D&D, Tactical Studies Rules, the original company, had published some fantasy rules for John Carter Mars and got ceased. They got C and D. They had put out Tricolor, which was revolutionary miniatures. Let's see what there was another one. None of which were, smashingly successful, obviously. And so Gary and his buddy gambled on D&D. Was Gary sorry to move away from Tactics? No. Would he still play Tactics? Yes.
Hmm.
I'm not sorry that I went away from board games, but if you saw my basement, you'd think I was a board gamer.
Hmm.
Magazine publishing, game magazines are dead. There's not enough advertising. If you can't get advertisers, you can't publish.
It's very sad. It's
You
very sad.
can't pay your printers, you can't pay your authors and your artists because there's no ads to support it. And it's just a fact. The internet has made a great number of magazines and magazine fields shrink or disappear.
Yeah.
I think of all the magazines I used to get, and now what do I get? I get The Week, I get Smithsonian. That's about all anymore. I used to subscribe to others, but they're all gone. I recommend you go see the one that was done for last week. It's called The Best Of. It's
Yes, I saw some of it.
that's a hoot. You really dug deep to get some of that stuff out. And I created an oxymoron. It's fantasy, get real.
Yes,
But that's okay. In the context, it fits. Taken out of context, it's an oxymoron.
I
Yes.
love it. I love it. Um, if you do you mind another couple of a final couple of questions, Tim? How are you feeling?
I'm fine.
You're
I
fine?
booked till 4 o'clock. I told my wife I'm going to be busy from 2 to 4.
You're very kind. Um,
What else have I got to do? It's 97 degrees out.
yeah, I don't particularly want to get out either. All right, so you said at one point, this was in your Dorks of Yore, that in 1977 or thereabouts, the realization set in that whereas you were scraping by before, you didn't need to worry about just paying the bills anymore, and that there was some sort of Rubicon had been crossed. Do you remember when you felt that way, or what made that?
Well, um, I have to refer back to the Dallas Egbert incident
Yeah.
under the tunnels, yada, 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 yada. That drew an enormous amount of public attention to TSR. It was so incessant that we rotated who had to answer calls today. And Brian came through after about 4 or 5 days of this, and he says, I think we're probably going to have to up our next print runs. And we did. And the rocket took off.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I think I've heard you say
There's
that.
no such thing as bad publicity.
So for you, that was the crux. That was the
Oh,
pivot.
that lit the fuse.
Okay.
That incident lit the fuse. If you look back at some of the books that get into that, the
Mm.
size of our print runs. Yeah.
Did you ever see? I can't believe he was in this. Tom Hanks, Mazes and Monsters.
Oh, horrible movie. Oh, terrible movie.
I can't find anything that Tom Hanks has ever said about it. I've done Google searches and everything. He
No,
doesn't talk about it.
no. I love Tom Hanks.
Mm,
I have never heard him answer a question about
mm,
that
mm,
or refer to it.
mm.
I think he immediately realized that what a crock it had been. Especially when somebody the size of Vin Diesel comes up and says, "Say, Tom, that's not the way we play." Oh yeah, Vin. You want to explain that to me?
He was a young actor at the time, presumably just needed whatever job he could get. But I was quite shocked that that was made. Um,
Well, it was horrible film and it was cheap exploitation.
yes, yes,
And,
with a
and
really good actor, with a really, really, really good actor. Um,
oh, there was a couple people in there that were pretty good. It was just horrible screenplay and horrible directing and not much of a plot. We made people play their character, play those numbers, those 6 numbers.
okay,
Don't exceed them. And a good referee, no, man, you didn't figure, you can't figure that out. You're not that smart. You're not that wise. You're gullible. Roll, and that's what we were supposed to do.
Did it
We were
happen much?
supposed to, we were supposed to keep you playing that sheet in front of you.
There are the people who love to role play their characters, including their defects, including to the detriment of their decision making.
Yes, and some of those people should have been strangled at birth, but okay.
This is why I find this interesting because I think this is the first attempt to suggest that you know what, you shouldn't allow the best decision if their character couldn't have thought of it based on their attribute.
That's right. That's right. And that's why we put it in there.
Mm. It's really interesting. It's really, really interesting.
And not a lot of people have picked up on that.
Yeah.
But it's a fundamental tenet of running a D&D party that if you got a dexterity of 9, no, you didn't untie the Gordian knot. You couldn't do that. But if you got a dexterity of 18, maybe give you a roll. That was the whole ethos back then was playing your character's limitations as well as their strengths. If you had that 17 strength or even an 18 strength and an intelligence of 9, you were barely average, 9 to 12, right?
Mm.
So no, you're not. You didn't figure out that fulcrum. Give me a break.
Do
You
you,
didn't figure out that 3 rock bounce. No, no. Try something else.
okay, easier question.
All right.
I know that you were involved in this. You and Gary locked yourselves up for 7 days, except for the wives' calls.
Yes,
To
yes, yes,
split D&D and AD&D. Um,
yes.
and this is a bit like my first question, which seems to be that you were the guy who was not dragged in, but you were brought in on every project. And I know that you said you were an editor and you were brought in as an editor, but the splitting of D&D and AD&D is not just editing, it's game design. And it
And
strikes
that
me
was
as
that was
interesting that it was you, that you were the one who was picked and you were taken off your normal job for
yeah,
7 days, right?
yeah.
Um, why do you think that was? Why was it
Because
you?
Gary and I still shared a common vision.
Yeah.
We had been there of those people there
Mm,
together mentally
mm,
for the longest period of time.
mm,
And that wasn't just days of cutting and pasting. It was arguing. And in some cases that would have been editing, if depending on whose argument won. It was arguing. Where do we put this? Where do we put that? How do we handle this? How do we handle that? I was different book. I was handed the task of, after a year of arguing with Gary, that mind flayers and brain eaters and thought eaters and brain moles and that were unfair because there was no way, there was no defense. If you ran into a mind eater or a mind flayer and he ate your brain, that was it. You had nothing. So I guess I was doing Eldritch Wizardry. He finally said, fine, invent a psionic system. And I did. I went home over the weekend and I invented psionics. And it was only supposed to be the slight chance that a very small percentage of all the characters rolled up might have
mm,
this latent gene that would. We knew everybody's going to be psionic. We knew every time we put out an NPC class that people were going to play them. We knew it, but we still very straight face. This is an NPC, knowing full well that next week people will be playing these characters or these classes. We didn't care. Supported the game. Supported the game, and we didn't care.
mm,
Okay, if that's the way you want to play. Play. Comes AD&D. Now, okay, which of these are going to become player characters, classes, and
mm,
which are just going to fall by the wayside? So we had discussions about that, those types of things. Modified a couple of spells. Um, Remember that Basic was being invented at the same time, and Basic was being cleaned up and dumbed down.
mm,
Took out all the demons and devils and all that, so moms and dads didn't have to worry about Frankie and and Susie becoming devil worshippers in the attic, we took all that out. So a lot of that was okay, basic, advanced. Advanced, what will we do with it later? We had different clams. First couple of days, that's all we did. Basic or advanced. Basic. Then we got to sorting out, okay, here. And Holmes did a marvelous job with a handful of glop we sent him. And then we began, okay, here's AD&D. And we knew the order that those hardbounds were released was well planned out, well in advance. We knew it didn't matter if it was said Dungeon Master's Guide. Every swing and dice bag in the world was going to buy it, whether they were a DM or not. Came out with a monster manual because everybody wants the monster manual first. Everybody bought it, and they did. Dungeon Master's Guide. Everybody bought it, and they did. Player's Handbook didn't have nearly the sales. So we knew, just like we stumbled upon it at a Detroit con with the G series. Everybody that was entered played in the G1 the first day. When G1 was over, the next morning, G1 went on sale. Everybody that had played had to buy it. Everybody who heard about it had to buy it. Every copy we took of all three modules sold. We could have sold 20% more.
Do you
Had
kind of
no idea that gimmick was going to be so successful. None. Saw that and said, all right, we got these three hardbound books coming out. How can we repeat this? Because hell, we were there to make a living. I never felt like we ever ripped off our customers, ever. Not once, ever. Did we ever do anything sleazy or cheap or not while I was there. And so, yeah, that was, I mean, Gary was, oh my God, Gary was the most fiendish typist I've ever known. We got done with the, dividing stuff up on the walls project and compiled all the first book. And Gary went home over the weekend and typed up 400-page manuscript. Hunt and peck on his manual typewriter.
I write a lot and I don't understand how that's humanly possible. 400 pages in a weekend.
Yeah. Well,
George.
some of it he was simply copying or rewording.
Right.
The rest he was filling in. Yeah, he'd have made a hell of a stenographer. Yeah, I blew me away. Just blew me away. Because we used to have these big cardboard boxes. We called them, they were called manuscript boxes. And he came in with one and dropped it on the desk. Said, been busy, huh? Yeah. And there it was. And that was the last time I had any involvement in TSR games.
Oh, okay.
All right. I was solely periodicals and what I was doing with periodicals.
You have also made me think about your three piles on your desk
Yes.
at Dragon Magazine.
Yes.
Before Dragon Magazine and possibly before Strategic Review, where would people have sent fantasy art and fantasy short stories?
Nowhere.
Yeah. Uh,
Unless it was a literary fanzine.
hmm.
There were literary fanzines, just as there were gaming fanzines. And there might still be, I don't know. But nowhere. I had the unmistakable advantage of being the only show in town.
Yeah.
And so I had amazing TSR poached half their artists from me.
Hmm.
I published Tom Canty. It's the first time he'd ever been paid for art. I published a couple other people, their very first first money they ever made. And they went on to, become fantasy artists or illustrators or whatever. That was half the joy, was finding new talent, both article writers and artists.
So having been the editor for 5 years, and it sounds to me like if someone said, what was your principal role there or your main achievement, it would be, I think you would say editor of Dragon Magazine. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what more people will know about. the work I did on original is now archival material, you know, and even first edition is only played by the diehards who started playing it
Mm.
when they started. Yeah, magazine still the magazine still has a niche and a kind of an aura to it. Despite the fact that the last a long time at the end it was trash. It was because it was all official this, official that, and they weren't. You know, I think part of the reason Dragon did well, even if a person, oh man, there's only a couple articles I like this month, but I saw these three ads to games I might be interested in. So I was giving them a window into the gaming industry, whereas toward the end it was all Wizards or Hasbro and nothing else.
Mm.
I saw one of the very, I think it was the second or third to last issue, and I looked through. It was in a bookstore. I looked through it. And this is all rules.
Mm.
Where's the articles? Where's the cartoons? Because I felt had to have a cartoon. That's why Phineas Fingers.
Mm.
I met the guy that did Phineas at a con in Lake Geneva, and the next year he and two of his buddies slept in my basement at the next con, and so Phineas was. I wanted something light. I be honest, I was copying Playboy magazine. They always had a comic or two in the back,
Mm.
something funny.
Mm.
And there were others, but I mean, Playboy was the most notable. I wanted to have that. And it could only be in the back because of the way offset printing and where the color falls. So it had to be in the back. He came up with Wormy. I said, whoa, yeah, let's do it. And pretty soon we had a comic section. And they were coming. Sometimes people were just getting it to read Wormy.
Mm.
Or if they didn't really like most of the other articles, at least there was Wormy.
I love
Yeah,
the art. For me, in the same way that it was hard. I mean, I came to it later, obviously. I think early 90s was the first time I bought Dragon magazine. But I mean, the point was that it was a magazine that had fantasy art. And I imagine the early 70s, if you wanted to see fantasy art, let alone paint it, where would you go?
Dragon magazine.
Mm.
Or, or if you were really good, you might be in a literary fanzine, but
Mm.
most of them are black and white.
Mm.